So we have like the world's biggest month if you're a fan of Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft as a result of everything that happened in 2020. All the awfulness delayed some things, canceled some events, and games kept charging on. These are live service games. We kept playing them. They have to keep updating. So every other year we get an expansion. This year is Final Fantasy's turn. We got WoW's last year and it pushed right up against the end of the year, so they feel like we're talking about them at the same time. Shadowlands is still new, and we didn't get our news about 6.0 coming off of Shadowbringers, and we're about to. So February 5th, we're going to have the showcase event. That is next Friday. Tuesday, we're going into patch 5.45. So then all we will have left is patch 5.5 and any of the sub patches to that, 5.51, 5.55, however many they choose to break it into. And then we will go into 6.0. During February, we are going to have in Final Fantasy, the 5.45 patch will finish off all of the abilities that they originally added to Blue Mage when they first added it to the game. It will finish off answering the question of what the answer to Baldesion Arsenal is, but it will not finish off Boja. They said there's another step to that in 5.55, so we've got time to kind of speculate on a lot of this. We have what was going to be a 14-hour broadcast cut down to what will probably be more in that kind of like 6 to 7 hour range. I don't know. Where the first half is going to be all about 6.0. Amazing things revealing if we're getting a new job, maybe 2 new jobs, where we're going, what the name is, all of this stuff. Who knows what all they're going to reveal, but they've got hours to do it. So they're going to tell us and show us something. From there, they'll take a break and we'll go into our live letter, which will tell us the beginning outline, the first section. They always kind of do 2 parts to this reveal of what's in patch 5.55 for Final Fantasy, which is going to contain our second ultimate fight. That's like your mythic equivalent fights for you WoW fans. That's your highest level difficulty. It's absolute shenanigans. That's going to contain the last of Boja, the last of the Nier raids. We've had Nier Automata has had a crossover event with us that's been in several parts. That's our big 24-man raid that will come to a finish there. We're going to send off into the next section of story hype. Remember, Shadowbringers told a story over 5.0, 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, but then the 0.4 and 0.5 set up the next one. So they're this weird, like it's inside Shadowbringers, but it's for 6.0, and it was the same at the end of Stormblood. 0.4, 0.5, we're setting up Shadowbringers, but they were inside Stormblood. So there's some weird stuff that happens there. We're going to talk about new jobs being added. Are we getting a second limited job? All of these things, there's so much on the table. What happens with Relics, Skysteel Tools? What do we get Ishgard housing this time? Like there's so many questions that could be in there, and so we're going to get all of that. And then on the 20th, we're going to turn around and we're going to do BLIZZCON. BLIZZCON is historically kind of in that same November timeframe as the NA FanFest. It's every year, and that's because Blizzard does all of Blizzard games instead of just World of Warcraft. So it's not every other year, but there's also not 3 of them in that given year as opposed to Final Fantasy where it's every other year, but there's an NA, EU, and Japan. So it's a bigger thing every other year, only 14 related. It's just different. And it kind of got me thinking like, well, how different are these games when it comes to the way the devs support it, the way the devs communicate? As we talk about this giant set of announcements, and as we prepare for, going into patch 9.1.2 and all of that with World of Warcraft and seeing, okay, Shadowlands seemed to have some good concepts. There were a couple of implementations we wish were better. Does it get better from here? Does it get worse? I think BFA had a pretty smooth launch. I think from there it got worse. Shadowlands, I think, has had an even better launch in some ways, in many ways. Does it get better? And if it gets better, like how good does it get over 0.1, 0.2? Anytime you're comparing these games, you're always comparing the end and beginning of the season of one game to the midsection of another. They're never in perfect sequence. And when I look at these events and when I look at the transparency surrounding it, it reminds me 14, the fans are so passionately in touch with the devs, and the devs update us through literal letters posted. They update us through 2 live letters for every patch. They then do these 14-hour broadcasts tied to various events. They celebrate the anniversary of the game in a big way, in a very live way. They have live broadcasts of like all these different things to different communities around the world. Their community team is so involved, but in trade for that, I don't know if it's due to a cultural barrier or time city differences or language differences, but like even the strongest ties they have, the strongest pillars of the community, your top creators like Zeppelin and Mr. Happy and so on. Those are just the first two that come to mind. Your biggest publications like Gamer Escape. When you talk about these just household names inside the community, they only get so much support. They only get so much information. They only get so many answers to questions. They only get so many chances for one-on-one interviews. And it's really tough, and it's really hard for them to kind of, because there's not a PTR or anything, sometimes there's just seasons where they like people are like, what do you know, and they're like, I know what you know. And so there's a weird thing like where they're more transparent than Blizzard, but like they aren't. And then the Blizzard side of things, like I'm not as involved there, so like from this is a feeling that this whole post is shifting into news and then like feelings. This is how I feel that they're very transparent. On the World of Warcraft side, I feel that they try to be transparent, and then when there's a disconnect between what the community's expecting and what the devs are delivering, and there starts to be some friction there, that they tend to withdraw and they tend to focus more on making the game. But in trade, they're not as transparent, and we rely on things like Wowhead and all of that seem to have a closer relationship with World of Warcraft than Gamerscape does with Final Fantasy. And like I don't know if that's just a perception thing, or if there literally is information that's going there, or if it's because of things like PTR and stuff giving the data miners and all of that on the World of Warcraft side just an infinite amount more information. Like I literally don't know. And there's a different thing there, but the tones of the community are different. Your ability to kind of go out there and complain about the game is much better received on the World of Warcraft side of things than on the Final Fantasy side of things. So like the communities themselves are different, and so their relationship with the devs themselves are different. I think both are made of people who care about the game, wake up every day for a game they're passionate about, for a company they've always wanted to work for, to make a game that they feel is headed in a good direction. They are trying to make better. Whether or not that lands, it varies patch to patch, content to content, and so on. Whether or not they're spending, our money the way we wish they were. Oh man, they're putting all in this type of content. I don't like that. Like that all aside, the intent is there, I think, in both cases. But how that gets communicated, how that gets shown is very different. And February is a great season for both games. BlizzCon is a great time to be a Blizzard fan. They have the entire, unlike FanFest, where it doesn't lean on the strength that it has. Square Enix is a huge number of games. You've got things like Kingdom Hearts, Avengers, Dragon Quest, the Final Fantasy franchise, obviously. You have so many titles that, like, if any of them are doing anything exciting, you could pair all those announcements. You could have an annualized conference, and you could do that. Blizzard has that, and has less household beloved franchises to choose from, and they still lean on that strength, and that protects them when World of Warcraft, or now World of Warcraft Classic, is not prepared to carry the weight, and just wants to be kind of a member of a team and not really be the star that it has for many years. World of Warcraft has been the star for many years of Blizzard's history from at least a revenue standpoint, and 14 is no slouch when it comes to the Square Enix side of things. So like I think for the fact that both communities have a similar set of ingredients to make up a community and to make up a dev team and to make up the relationship between the dev, that game and its larger development family, and the relationship between and the events that surround that and the timing, and both celebrate their anniversaries, and both do have seasonal events, and both put out sorts of interviews and Q&As, and both have panels at their conferences where they sit down and they talk about how lore is made and all that. It is just, this is such an exciting season. This February is such an exciting time for both games, and it just reminds me how different they're going to feel, and I'm identically excited about both. I'm really excited about BlizzCon, knowing, like, are we going to find out more about Diablo 4? Do we find out more about Overwatch 2? What is going on with Heroes of the Storm? What is going on with Hearthstone? They're not games I heavily engage with, but I love knowing what's going on with StarCraft 2. RTS is just as a genre is something I'm really fascinated to see what happens to them over the next 10 years. And then, of course, what's happening with World of Warcraft? Is the Burning Crusade coming to Classic? If so, when, how, what happens to Vanilla? If, on the other hand, what happens to Shadowlands? What are they prepared to talk about? What are they prepared to reveal? I think we just had the Mythic Plus invitational stuff kind of posting. So, like, there's of course all that stuff going on. What's the timing of the patches? What will be in every patch? I'm excited to engage this. I'm working on leveling up all my tanks, so I'm not as focused on in-game right now, but I love paying attention to it. I love watching as I work on getting hopefully 6 tanks, and then priest and shaman, and then some spare druids, and and then probably from there a couple more. I'm looking at probably getting 15, 16 characters into Shadowlands during Shadowlands, and I've only ever usually played a game with one character at a time, seriously. So, you know, I'm pretty heavily focused outside of it. BFA set the seeds for that, and Shadowlands is just reaping that, whether that's the best use of Shadowlands or not. And then over on the 14 side of things, like, I'm hungry for more content. My tanks are all at cap. My gatherers are all at cap. My crafters are all at cap. I'm not done with everything I can do with them. I'm not done learning about them. But, like, there's not an infinite amount of runway on those. And so I am looking forward to this being an expansion year and what that means. What does it mean narratively? It's a much more story-driven game historically, like over the course of a franchise. It's established itself as very story-driven. What does that mean for the story? Now that I'm somebody who cares about story, which is all new, I'm just excited. I'm excited for both games. I think it's a great time to play either game. It's a great time to join either game. They're very different new player experiences. They're very different games in kind of how they work in the 10% that makes them different. The first 90% of them is the exact same ingredients, maybe assembled a little differently, but they're the exact same game, where all of the friction and the disagreements between the communities of which game's better, which game they prefer, is that last little segment. It's that little bit of like, you know what, they both have this, but that last 10% is like, well, how much emphasis did you put on it? How did you do it differently? You know, they both have it. It's kind of mostly the same stuff, but like that last little bit's like, yeah, but I added this one ingredient and it totally changes everything. And so I think that's where you kind of end up focusing on the rub in these, and which game is best for you is it's a hard question to answer. It's not, I know people who found the best answer for them are like, yeah, it's the best one, but like, it really depends on what you're looking for. There are people that join a community and then very quickly that community goes, I don't think you're in the right place. And that's hopefully not meant as a harsh thing, but just like, you should be in a game that's a good fit and you enjoy, and you're having a lot of fun with. And if one of these games is it and the other game's not, I hope you are able to find the right one. So I'm really excited about this next month. I'm excited to find out what's going on with Shadowlands, what's going on with Blizzard as a whole, what's going on with Final Fantasy XIV. I would love for them at the same time to address some things about 11 and 7R and 16. I don't think they will. There's a lot of big announcements. Brian and I talked about that over on Work to Game. I don't really have any big expectations for BlizzCon because it's such a big conference. I find it easier to go in and just say, it's just going to be a good show. It's just going to be a lot of fun, as opposed to a FanFest. Like, it's very 14 driven, so it's very easy to start wrapping your head around, like, how does this play out? It's also a very specified broadcast. We don't yet know kind of everything that BlizzCon's going to have, and how closely will it be to a traditional BlizzCon? How equipped are they to set that up in a digital format? With, you know, relatively short notice. So that's it, guys. I'm excited for the month of February. The month of February could define. January was kind of everything that didn't make it into 2020 that ideally would have. February is, for me, what sets the tone of, does World of Warcraft or does Final Fantasy win 2021? I don't think it's that if one wins, the other cannot. I think they are both being held up to their own standards. They can both win. They can both lose. I bet at least one wins. So if one wins and the other fails, it may feel like they won, so they were forced to fall short. I think both games are in a position to have two really strong expansions going at the same time with two communities that are actually just content, or maybe even happy. So I think we're in a good spot as MMO players, that the two biggest kids on the block are just setting up the potential to crush it this year. And I really wish the best for both of them. And then, of course, I'm looking forward to starting to cover another game, because there are other big MMOs, and I'm not as well versed in them, and so I'm looking forward to this channel introducing another MMO so that I can start to know it, ideally a fraction as well as I know Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft. So ideally I can get even just a fraction of the joy that they have brought me over a combined, whatever the math on it is, 22 years or something. You know, one's 15 and one's 7 or something. I don't know. Whatever the math on that is. ARR and vanilla. So that's it, guys. February's going to be awesome.